Welcome to Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Shipp, and I'm excited to be sharing with you my life with a son on the spectrum. This podcast is for anyone who is looking for quick tips and perspective, but most of all, for hope and inspiration. So sit back, relax, and let's put the pieces together. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Shipp. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you didn't get a chance to tune into last week's episode, please check it out. We are continuing our talk today with the fabulous Tracy, author of Warrior Mom. And if you have not picked up this book, I'm telling you guys, please do. This book is amazing. And you know, all of you that have been listening to me regularly know that I've done a lot of therapies and research and things with my son Drayson, but this for me was so eye-opening and inspiring, and also was kind of helping to revitalize me personally to delving a little bit deeper in ways that I can help my son Drayson. So first and foremost, Tracy, thank you so much for being back on the show again today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited. So just to kind of recap, for those of you listening, Tracy is a certified integrative health practitioner, and she's the best-selling author of Warrior Mom, A Mother's Journey in Healing Her Son with Autism. And I kind of wanted to carry in the conversation, you know, we kind of ended with, I mean, so many wonderful topics. Like I said to you when we were ending the show last week, I could just talk to you forever, Tracy. But I kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the underlying conditions that you realized that Noah had, and how you were able to address those, and how that's helped him today. I mean, now he's 19 and he's fully functioning person, and he's working and going to college and driving and doing all the things that you aspire your child to be able to do, right? So can you talk to our listeners today a little bit about some of the underlying health conditions and how you address them with Noah?
Okay, so you have like your pre-genetic dispositions, and then you have what's going on underneath. What, do they have a viral load? Do they have leaky gut? Do, all these different things. Do they have parasites in the gut? There's so much that can contribute to our mental health, and that's everybody. I'm not just talking about autism. In regards to genetic predispositions, we typically focus on two of those, and one is MTHFR. And you can either have one of those genes or you can have two. And if you have two, you get it from both parents. If you have one, you get it just from one. So typically if the child tests for one, I always tell the parents, you should get tested, and, because it most likely came from one or the other. That means that they don't methylate properly. So if you don't methylate properly, you can't get rid of toxins. So, your body's going to hold on to toxins more than the average person. So that's one of those pre-genetic dispositions. So, we're swimming in a toxic soup. I could sit here and name a number of things, but, you can just guess what those are.
Yeah.
Anyway, number two is mitochondrial disorder. Now, there was an actual study done with mitochondrial disorder that it's one of those pre-genetic dispositions that if they get something, then if they have mitochondrial disorder, if they have that pre-genetic disposition, the chances of them regressing into a state of autism is over 80%. So that is one of those pre-genetic dispositions you always want to check for. I'm going to tell you to just guess what that thing is so she can keep this on YouTube and everywhere else.
Read the book, people. Read the book. Just read the book.
Those are two genetic predispositions.
Right.
And then we have, as you know, pandas. Pandas. Pediatric autoimmune neuropsychotropic disorder associated with streptococcus. Now, I'm telling you, if your child has tics, Tourette's, behavioral disorder associated with autism or ADHD or anything for that matter, anything that's like stirring up behaviors, or even if they do have an autism diagnosis, most of these kids, like probably over 90% of them, have pandas. And it's high levels of strep in the blood. So what happens is that causes major inflammation on the brain and can cause regression. And what we want to do is we want to get those strep levels down. We want to get them normalized. And I remember when I talked to Dr. Pierre Corey, he had told me that his daughter almost died from pandas. Now, in all my years, even after writing the book, I had no idea that it was a life-threatening disorder. So I always tell parents the first thing you should test for in all those tests is definitely check for pandas. And not every general practitioner knows what pandas is. So you may need that functional medicine doctor. They can go through medmaps.org to find a practitioner that might know a little bit more about those functional medicine approaches, and that's Medical Academy of Pediatric Special Needs. So anyway.
And is that usually typically a blood test, Tracy? Is that usually?
So yes,
okay.
pandas is detected through blood.
Okay.
So they check for that viral load. They can have other viruses, that Epstein-Barr. So all of us, if you've ever read a medical medium book, I'm here to tell you we all have Epstein-Barr. It's like, what level of Epstein-Barr do you have? There's so many different strains of Epstein-Barr. But if you ask the medical medium, everything is caused by Epstein-Barr. And it's major inflammation. We're feeding it. Anytime you're eating junk food and garbage, or you're stuffed with pesticides or toxic food or genetically modified stuff, anything, it's going to inflame that Epstein-Barr. So they also check for Epstein-Barr. So in my book, I have this big, long protocol under the biomedical intervention part as to the different types of tests. And I sat down with my doctor, and we went over the protocol that we did and tested for back then. And then you definitely want to do a stool test. So yeast in the gut is going to inhibit the body's ability to absorb proteins and nutrients and vitamins and all those things that we need to survive. So a lot of times you'll see if they have pale skin and dark circles around the eyes, a distended belly, self-injurious behavior, they're leaning over chairs, they're putting pressure on their stomach, they're not sleeping, they're playing in their poop, that is a huge sign of leaky gut. A white, filmy tongue. These are all different signs that we have yeast in our gut.
Okay.
And we really want to do a comprehensive stool test. I say the 1 day is not good enough. It needs to be 2 to 3 days, that comprehensive test. So you get, various different samples. And if your child is constipated, and on the constipated side, that's another, inflammatory gut, if they're not going every day, and they should be going every day. If they're not, give them magnesium at night. Do not give them Calm. There was a study on Calm where there's heavy metals in Calm, and we don't want that. Get them
supplement.
Get them a magnesium supplement at night. For little kids, there's chewables, and get them. And also, because we typically give our children baths at night, is put a cup of Epsom salts in their bath. That's magnesium. When your body heats up, we absorb that, and it also relaxes them and calms them. You could put like a drop of lavender, and I do say a drop because essential oils are pretty strong.
Yes.
And to make sure that you have good quality essential oils like doTERRA, your Young Living are really the higher quality ones. But you really just need a drop to, that calming effect. And so when we get those test backs, parasites, they're finding that a lot of these kids have parasites, and that's what, it's getting into the bloodstream, and it's getting to the brain. And so we want to clean the body of those parasites. And there's different types of treatment, and it's not all in my book because I've learned so much more, especially since I started hosting an autism conference, that a lot of my speakers and vendors, I still learn so much more. You should get them tested for Lyme. Lyme is very important. a lot of individuals, especially if you have joint pain and so on and so forth, have Lyme. And it's just one of those number one tests that everybody should test for. Their whole family, just rule it out, make sure you don't have Lyme. But if you've ever been bitten by a bug, whether it be a mosquito or even a tick or even a flea, just get tested. Right. So I think we've all been bitten by a bug before. So I say tested for that. So there's a number of things, and then we want to incorporate a healthy lifestyle. So we want to remove those inflammatory foods, and this is your forte. So we know that gluten, dairy, and soy, those things cause inflammation in the body. So we can't digest them the way they're processed and made in the United States. Like our body just can't handle. Wheat, ever since the 60s, has been genetically modified, whether it's organic or not, into dwarf wheat. And they soak it in chemicals, so on and so forth. It's just rule it out. There's so many alternatives these days. And I'm here to tell you, if you have gassy bloating, you have a wheat, dairy, whatever allergy, you can do a Whole30 if you really want to go without doing because the food allergy tests, they change based on what you eat. If you eliminate it, it's not going to be accurate. So I probably wouldn't test positive for a gluten allergy because I haven't eaten gluten. So my body's not having any type of reaction. Right. So, and I talk a little bit about that in the book, the histamine reactions and all that stuff. And you want to check histamine levels too. Are they histamine sensitive? Is there histamine high in their body? That's going to factor into, but there's so much information, not just, the book itself, but also go to a conference. I went to so many conferences back in the day. I went to Autism One. I went to DAN conferences. I went to so many. And then when Autism One stopped doing in-person conferences, I'm like, these parents need community. They need to meet other parents. They need to see these doctors in person. And so I started the Autism Health Summit, and then recently started Autism Health, which is a nonprofit organization, which is now a 501c3.
Congratulations.
And to help support scholarships for those who are low income. Right. To any type of education. It could be for the event itself. It could be for another educational event. But if it's for training, education, or anything that will, assist a parent or a caregiver or whatever, or even a therapist on furthering their education, then that's what we started the nonprofit for. Yeah. But, there's so much out there, so much information. Don't believe me. Do your own research. I probably read over 100 PubMed studies rating that book. You're right. People are like, well, how long did it take you to write it? And I'm like, well, my story was like
piece of cake.
I don't know, maybe a week or two, maybe a couple weeks.
Right.
The editing process was grueling. It was like my editor just kept bleeding all over my paperwork. But the research part, once I started to get into the guidebook in the biomedical, because I'm not a doctor, so I had to put all those research studies. I had to back everything up with facts, and it is facts. They're published research.
The research is overwhelming, and I think that's why I was so impressed, because I've read lots of other books, and some of them have great research as well, but this one to me was so comprehensive, and I appreciated that, because I think you can identify with this. When you're deciphering through that research, it's overwhelming, it's daunting, and I mean, you and I both have a science background, but for a mother or father or a parent that doesn't have maybe that science background, it's really hard for them to comprehend some of this research and to know what's true and what's not.
But I also wanted to put it in terms of, I put nothing in scientific terms. I can tell
No,
you,
you
I've listened
didn't.
to some
No.
speakers
Yeah.
that I don't understand.
No, you didn't.
I'm
And
like,
you're 100% correct. And I think that's why I also enjoyed it even more, because I didn't have to like decipher some of the jargon that I'm used to reading through. But and you're right. And for those of you listening, it is broken down in a way for you to very much understand. And I think that that's why it was such a breath of fresh air for me. Because even though I do know how to pick it apart and tear it apart, I mean, it sometimes it's hard to, when you're thinking about your son or your child and you're thinking about trying to do what's best for them, you already have that kind of almost state of overwhelm. At least I do sometimes. I still do sometimes, and I think that that's what I really appreciated about reading that portion of the book, because you broke it down in such a way that made it so understandable for people.
and if they want to, there's the references and
Yes.
it's there.
Yes.
Not every author has to reference.
Yes.
It's choice. You can
Right.
pretty much write just about anything you want these days, and you can publish, self-publish, publish, whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wish I self-published it, because then I wouldn't be going through. Because if you look on Amazon, you can't find my book right now, because it's like there's a glitch, right? So you can find my Audible and my ebook, but my paperback's not on there. So if you want the paperback, you have to go through, you can go through any other source. So I say, go to warriormom.com. I have a book tab, and it'll tell you all the other places you can get it at Barnes & Noble. It is in store for Barnes & Noble in various stores, not every store, but it's supposed to be in a store every so many miles, right?
Okay.
So they can find it in a local store. It's not going to be in every one. So you just go online, you find it. But it's just useful information. And then I was coaching so many parents. So I was a mentor for over 13 years. And I'm telling them the same thing. And they're like, you should really write a guidebook. And it wasn't, I always say, God keeps sending me angels. So during COVID, I went to this spiritual retreat, and I met this woman who had just wrote a book, and she's like, she's like, yeah, I'm a best-selling author. And I'm like, oh, I always wanted to write a book about my story with my son. And she's like, so what's stopping you? And I'm like, well, I guess that would be me. And I don't think myself as an author. There's by the way, there is no making money off of being an author. It's a labor of love. You have to have a purpose, unless you're a Harry Potter, writer. And even she went through self-publishing and her own journey.
Her whole nightmare. Yeah.
Yes.
She had her own stuff.
She has her own perfect story, but it really is. And to get it out there, to get the information out there, if anything's controversial, they're going to hold you back from ever making like the big bestseller lists. But any of that stuff, you just get around it. So warriormom.com has all the information that anyone can need.
And that's, it's really, like I said, it's great information, and I highly recommend it to everyone, because it's, like I said, I've done a lot of other things with Drayson, and I think for me it was just a breath of fresh air, and also revitalizing me, because I know that the next level up has to happen with Drayson. I know that there's things that I need to still implement and do for him, and because I want to, not because I feel like I have to, because I want to, and because I feel that he deserves that. He absolutely deserves that. And I think that you bring such a fresh approach to a more holistic, right? We're talking about more holistic medicine or a holistic approach. And I'm sure you've received a lot of backlash and controversy over that. I could be mistaken, but I'm going to take a guess that you have. I know, right? For those of you listening and not watching, she is making the sign that she's closing her mouth and, putting away the key. But yeah, and I'm right. Here's to speak no evil. Yeah, exactly. So I think though that it's so important to, how did you overcome that? Because I'm sure personally you had to combat a lot of naysayers, right? When you were going through this process with Noah.
believe it or not, the naysayers are the ones on the spectrum. All my one ratings are self-diagnosed individuals on the spectrum. Okay. And I don't disregard, and I've even been able to kill them with kindness as to where they're like, oh, okay. When they're like, oh, well, how dare you say you cured your child? I said, I did not say I cured my child. I said I healed him, in which I meant I healed his underlying conditions associated with his diagnosis so he could get to a functioning state. He is still autistic. Okay.
Right.
Let me tell you, still autistic. And I actually had to go back and edit. My son had me edit. He's like, Mom, you need to be very specific. And always learning from that kid. He's so intelligent. But what parents also need to know is that at every phase, there's a different journey. And like my last chapter in my story says, let go and let God. Because at some point, you have to, my daughter was like, so we go to London, and Noah wanted to go to this convention. So he didn't ask for anything for Christmas. He said, I want to go to London. I want to go to this convention. So I have friends that live in London. So we go and stay with them. But the convention was 2.5 hours from their house. So he was willing to take an Uber and like a train and an Uber part way and check into a hotel, because he was there for 2 days. And my daughter's freaking out. She's like, how could you just let him just go like that? And not, I'm like, stop. The more I put like restrictions on him, the farther I'm going to push him away. And he's 19, and a part of me believes that he's a little more independent than she is. She's my stepdaughter, but she's a trip. She's absolutely hilarious. She's like, oh my God, he's gonna, and he's not. I sit down with him. I educate him. He does good. So he took, like, it was part train, part Uber ride. And he checked into the hotel all by himself. Checked into the conference. I'm texting him the whole time. He's like, Mom, I'm okay. He wanted to go to London by himself. And I'm like, no.
Nice try. No. We got to baby step this.
He's not afraid. But this is what I wanted for my kid.
Right.
He had his first drink. He's very responsible, but it's legal to drink at 19 years old over there. So he had his first drink. He told me all about it. He's like, it was a rum drink. The conference was Sea of Thieves. So there's this whole pirate theme.
Oh, how fun.
He goes making goofy signs, dressed like Kermit the Frog. He's so much fun, but he's not afraid of anything. And then during the whole trip, he's wanting to take the tube everywhere. That's like the subway system there. Yeah. And she is just losing it. She's like, you need to get home. It's late and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're a trip. I'm like, you don't understand. I said, first of all, he's a night owl and he's exploring, but he was back by like 10.
Right.
He was good. And he's not sitting there on an electronic device, doing nothing. Yeah. But as I tell parents, there's different phases.
Right.
And with teenage years, Noah didn't want to do the diet anymore. His friends were eating foods that tasted so much better. He said, but it's really not food, honey. And he's like, but I want to eat it. And so the diet went out the window. Noah started gaining weight because he got pandas again. So then he was on antibiotics and, so it was like things started to go south. He's like, he engorges himself with food because he feels like he never got to, so he never was fed any of those foods like sugar or, high carb stuff. And now that's all he wants. So he ended up gaining a whole bunch of weight, but recently he lost like 30 pounds. So he's doing way better. He works out with a trainer 3 days a week. But I had to get my son to care about his health. Right. But either way, they're on their own perfect and beautiful journey, and you just love them, you nurture them, you peel them off their face when they fall down, right?
Right.
And
And you molded
it,
him and shaped him and helped to shape him
yeah,
to be that person. And I think that's my oldest is grown and out of the house. And I tell him all the time, I'm like, it's just a different kind of worry now. He's
yeah,
28, almost 29. And I'm like, son, I'm always going to worry about you. I'm your mom. It's just a different kind of worry. But I do love the fact that I can hear about his journey and what he's up to and what he's doing, even though sometimes I'm like, and I'm like, nope, that's how we raised him and how we molded him. And he's off doing his own thing now. And I very much want that for my son, Drayson, as well. And I see that happening for him. And I think there's a little bit of a process as a parent too, when you start enduring some of these journeys that they're going through, like, okay, now it's a whole nother gamut of things that you have to consider and realize that you have to emotionally deal with yourself. Right. So,
yeah, because even my son alone thinks me and Steve are like, me and my husband are conspiracy theorists. He's
oh
like,
yeah.
Mom, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And I'm like, listen,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm,
And
but my husband will poke the bear. Oh no, you
yeah.
want to test my theory?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like, I'm just trying to have a peaceful dinner. And Noah's like, I don't want to sit with dad.
I know. Now you're like, okay, well, here we go. I know. So is there any final advice or message that you'd like to share with parents and families that are maybe dealing with a new diagnosis or even a current diagnosis, and they've been dealing with it for a while and they're not really quite sure what to do? Do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners today?
Oh, absolutely. Trust your intuition. So I always
Yeah.
say that's God's way of speaking to you.
Yeah.
And you can believe in God or not believe in God. But we were given, gut feelings, senses, intuition for a reason. And my
Mm-hmm.
intuition kept telling me something was wrong. And, early intervention is key.
Mm-hmm.
Their brains are starting to develop. What we put in their bodies is super important. Do your research. Don't believe
Mm-hmm.
me. Don't believe Nikki. Just do your
Right.
research. It's all there. It's laid out, and trust the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful journey, but
Mm-hmm.
if you just trust the process and know and set a clear intention, because people ask me, what's the number one thing that worked for your kid? Yes, diet was the number one thing we tried,
Right.
but setting a clear intention was my number one thing. I
Mm-hmm.
knew my son was going to live a normal functioning life. And if you don't believe it, it'll work against you, I promise you.
Right.
So, for any information for like my book, you can go to warriormom.com or autismhealth.com. So that is the nonprofit that we started. But you can also see there's a conference tab to the Autism Health Summit. And in case anybody ever wants to attend the conference, we do events through Autism Health, to
Okay.
raise funds. 100% of the proceeds go to education for parents and caregivers. None of us are paid. We're all volunteers. And it's, my husband and I invested a lot in the conference last year, and it took a lot of money from us to pay for those scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted parents to be able to go.
Right.
I always say they have to come up with at least one small, investment, $25 or whatever, and
Right.
they have to prove that, there's a financial strain.
Right.
So you have to believe and you have to trust that there's this beautiful journey that they're going to be on. Even, my son still has his own challenges, but
Right.
you just love them. That's the number one thing. I recently lost my nephew, to whom me and my husband raised. We were his guardians all through his teenage years, and he
Mm-hmm.
took his life 2 months ago. But I said it wasn't tough love that kept Brandon alive all those years. It was love that kept him alive for 35 years.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there was an end to his journey, but I do realize that he was on a specific journey, that I had
Right.
this contract to be his mom in life. because my sister couldn't. And,
Right.
you know, to just love them. So love your children, whether they're speaking, non-speaking, they're addicts, they're not addicts, they have mental illness, they don't. Just love them, because to lose a child, I'm telling you, really sucks.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. I can't even imagine. And Tracy, you're such an inspiration to me, and I so appreciate you on so many different levels. I know I look forward to more and more of our future conversations together. But thank you so much for your time and your energy today. I feel truly blessed to have you on the show, and for our listeners to be listening to all of the wonderful, golden nuggets of wisdom that you gave today on the show. So thank you so much for being here.
And thank you for what you do. I mean, it's no easy task to put a podcast out there. It really isn't.
Yeah.
People have always asked, do you have your own podcast? I'm like, no.
No, I know. Well, and like you, the reason why you wrote this book, this is exactly why I started the podcast. I guess I could say I like being the squeaky wheel. I don't know. People might call me something similar, but in different names that I probably can't say on the show. But, I think that's why I did too, because I wanted to, when we were going down that journey as well, I remember saying to my husband, how many other parents is this happening to? And that they can't find the resources or the tools or even the inspiration to go and do more to help their children, to be more, to do more, so that their children can be more and do more. And I think that's exactly why I created the show. And so that's why I think I identify so much with what you say in the book and what you're saying to our listeners today, because just like you created the book, that's exactly why I created this podcast. So thank you so much for saying that to me. I really appreciate it. So thanks again, Tracy. Yes, absolutely. Well, this concludes our episode for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to all of our listeners. If you have questions, comments, or even a show topic that you would like to hear about, please feel free to send me an email at info@piecesformypuzzle.com. Don't forget to hit that like and follow button on Facebook and Instagram if you haven't already, or feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd love to have you as a subscriber. And most importantly, please feel free to spread the word about this show. We want to inspire as many friends, family, loved ones in the autism community and even outside of the autism community. It's really important that we spread the word about how we can help our friends and family. Once again, thanks for tuning in. I greatly appreciate all of you. And until next time, keep working on your puzzle. And remember, you don't have to have it all solved in a day. Take care.